We come together here each Sunday, or mostly each Sunday, because we believe that God is love, and we believe that this creator of the universe is still creating. We come here because we believe that our lives have meaning and purpose, and somehow those two truths are connected. Now, how they're connected is the question for the ages. But that's okay. That's why we keep coming back to the experiences and the explanations from thousands of years ago to the people who came before us, to read how they have understood their relationship to God and to the world and to everyone in it. And so today, the prophet Jeremiah offers us an image to help us in our quest. Maybe God is like a potter. I love pottery. I love buying pottery at all the art shows. I love drinking coffee from a good pottery mug that my husband tries very hard not to break when he's doing the dishes because he knows I love them so much. I took lots of pottery classes in high school and college and enjoy that process, mostly hand building. I enjoy it, smelling the clay. I have to say, though, I never got good at the pottery wheel. Most of my pottery ended up looking like the little one up here on the front, very freeform. The wheel is harder. Now, this beautiful pot over here was made by Steve Clark, who's in there also preparing food. He's got a handle on that wheel. But the funnest part, I think, about doing pottery is like getting it started and taking out the clay and smashing it together, and you have to get the air pockets out, so you have to slam it onto the table and fold it, slam it again, and I think Steve will agree. It is really cathartic. Love it. So in our Old Testament reading today, God has told the prophet Jeremiah to go drop by the local potter's house and see what he's doing. This is where he'll get his next message. When he arrives, he watches this artist in process as he's working at his wheel and he's trying to create a vessel, and it gets spoiled. It gets out of shape on the wheel, and so he slams it down again and begins to rework it. And this time he begins to make something completely different. We don't know if it was first a bowl and then a pitcher, but we know that it changed, and the vision of what he was creating changed in the process. And so from this very earthy, tactile activity, the prophet understands the message for the people and what they need to hear from God. The Lord says to Israel, "Can't I do with you just as this potter has done? Just like the clay in the potter's hand, so are you in my hand, O house of Israel." The potter wasn't pleased with how that first pot was turning out, so he squashed it back, folded it a ball, started all over again, creating over again something different, but something beautiful and something useful. Jeremiah describes God's activity in the world like an artist. God has a vision for what creation could become with beauty and novelty and meaning and purpose. Only God has a more difficult task ahead than the potter, because God is working with materials that, well, have some say in the matter. We make choices that the clay can't make. The human life is not inert, not a mere combination of minerals that are mixed together with water. Oh, we have volition and we have will. We have some choice in the way that we're being formed. So even though there is this interchange, this back and forth between artists and the materials, building and changing and rebuilding, just as the potter shapes the clay, it is God who is seeking to shape us. And we can be willing to take that form that the Creator intends, or we might not. Jeremiah continues his message. God says, "At one moment I may declare concerning a nation or a kingdom that I will pluck it up and break down and destroy it. But if that nation turns from its evil, I will change my mind about the disaster I intended to bring on it. And at another moment I might declare concerning a nation or kingdom, I will build it up and plant it But if it does evil in my sight, not listening to my voice and my will, I can change my mind about the good that was intended for it. And, that sounds kind of ominous. But Bruce Epperly points out that this is a metaphor, and a metaphor that could be suggesting that when people are attentive to God, God can do great things and invite the people to flourish in new and creative ways. But if the people, or for that matter, a person, turns away from God, God continues to work with those people, that person, but with a different set of possibilities. I believe this is a message for us, but we do recognize that in many ways our context has changed, our way of being in the world and society has changed. The prophet Jeremiah was speaking to a nation of Israel at a time when nations were theocracies. They were formed with one belief and one understanding of God. That was part of the national identity. There was that common understanding, and everyone was required to believe that. But after the coming of Christ, we find the relationship between people and God moving away from national identities towards chosen identities. People who were citizens of many different nations could become followers of Jesus. They could become part of a church and not change their nationality. You didn't have to change your citizenship to follow Jesus. And God did not love one nation more than another. God does not love one group of people more than another. A person could be a citizen of Israel or Rome or Greece or Egypt and be a part of God's church and God's people. And God continued to influence individual lives to effect change on earth, now through groups of people working together, not so much by nationality, but by chosen alliances. So it can be by congregations cooperating with other congregations, cooperating with their local governments, or standing up to their local governments, depending on the situation. People choosing to work together to bring God's vision of peace and justice on earth. According to the prophet, any of us, even those who God had called to do God's work in the world, could become again like the clay on the potter's wheel, becoming misshapen, no longer able to be what they were intended to be. But the encouraging part of this image, this metaphor, is that potters never waste their clay. Old failed pots get recycled into new ones. Potters would never just throw it out or destroy it. Instead, they reshape, they rework, they rewater, they begin again, shaping material into something new and beautiful and meaningful. So in God's relationship with us, we are not talking about destruction. We are talking about reworking. We are not talking about punishment. We are talking about recreation. The early church father Origen of Alexandria said this is called apokatastasis. Reconstitution, restitution, restoration, this belief that all things, all creation will be redeemed and reconciled to God. An affirmation that reworking isn't punishment, but recreating something beautiful, something more than we could have hoped for. But in the meantime, we can be very difficult to work with. I love the way that Todd Weir puts this. He says, I'm struck by the answer that Jeremiah anticipates when he points out that the people say, it's no use. We will continue in our own plans, and each will follow the stubbornness of his evil heart. This statement kind of sums up some of our predicament. He says the first human problem is hopelessness. It's no use. People say, change isn't possible for me. I've been to therapy. It didn't help. The problems of the world are too big, so what can I do? Other people might be able to change, but not me. He says our national mood is so negative now that we are skeptical of hopeful people. Most people, though, are not seeking to do the evil that Jeremiah warns against. We're just succumbing to the banal. Armed with a cynical wit, a channel changer, and a bag of Doritos. Okay, yes, there are a few evil people out there in the world, but he says, I believe the true road to hell passes through a lazy boy. We can't blame the chair for being comfortable. And I don't think we're lazy as much as we are feeling overwhelmed and paralyzed by our fear and stuck in uncertainty and then choosing distraction over action. We are holding on to what we have, afraid that change might only make things worse. Hopelessness is our problem in our time. But if we can revive and renew that sense of hope, if we are able to stay hopeful and then surrender to the process of letting go and allowing ourselves to be remade and remolded, we can, and our city and our country and our world and this wonderful earth can be remade, and beautiful things can come, and life can have meaning, fulfilling the Creator's intention. That is why we come together, to bring hope to one another. I remember how one of our McAfee students, James Blay, described his struggle because he came here to study at Macon University and then at McAfee, and after finishing his schooling, he returned to his homeland of Liberia, and he wrote about his new beginning. He says, I see all of the challenges, the hunger, the poverty, the joblessness, the illiteracy, the ever-present sting of corruption that is laying waste to our nation. The leaders of my people expected to be deliverers and problem solvers, and they have become oppressors and victimizers. But somewhere buried in the psyche of the people is a deep-rooted hope that is characterized by perseverance and faith. And my people still find a way to wake up every morning and live in the face of the challenges and to live life abundantly. And so it's time to do the work, whatever the little things are that we can. Together, we'll paint a picture to make the world better. We'll become what the Creator has called us to be. James was speaking to the people of his nation, but his words speak to all of us. Jeremiah was speaking to the people of Israel, but these words have meaning for all of us. We can hold on to the hope. We can be a part of what the Spirit of God is creating in the world in our time. Whatever that one small thing is that you can do, whatever the small things are that we can do together, we will do to create what God has called us to be remade. The church looks different. Our lives go in different directions than we intend them to do. The world looks different than God intended it to. But the Creator is still creating, and we are a part of that. God the potter, the original artist, is making something beautiful and something meaningful in the world. And each one of us is a significant part of that creation when we allow ourselves to be changed and molded and shaped by the artist's hand.